When most people think of James Bond actors who threw away their careers, George Lazenby's name immediately comes to mind. But the real story behind his spectacular rise and fall is far more twisted than anyone imagined. What started as a miracle survival story became one of Hollywood's most shocking examples of self-sabotage, complete with death threats, mysterious feuds, and connections to some very dark Hollywood secrets. George Lazenby wasn't supposed to live past his 12th birthday. Born in 1939 in rural Australia, his childhood was dominated by a medical nightmare that would shape everything about his reckless personality. Between the ages of 1 and 3, doctors performed 67 separate surgeries on his tiny body, leaving him with only half of one functioning kidney. The procedures were so brutal that his mother was told to take him home to die. There was no way a child could survive with such massive internal damage. But Lazenby didn't just survive. He seemed to develop an almost supernatural disregard for danger. This near-death childhood experience created a compulsive need to test whether death would finally catch up with him, a trait that would later manifest in his willingness to destroy everything good that came his way. The path that led this damaged Australian kid to become James Bond started with what can only be described as an elaborate con job. In 1964, Lazenby moved to London chasing after a woman who disappeared without a trace. Instead of going home, he took a job as a used car salesman where his natural ability to deceive people made him a star. A talent scout spotted him and launched him into the modeling world, where he became the highest-paid male model in Europe. In 1968, producer Albert Broccoli happens to sit next to Lazenby at a London barbershop. Something about this unknown model's dangerous confidence caught Broccoli's attention. Lazenby showed up to his John Bond audition wearing a suit that Sean Connery had ordered but never collected, complete with a Rolex and Marina watch identical to Bond's. He looked the part, but had never acted in anything more substantial than a chocolate bar commercial. During the crucial fight scene audition, Lazenby's inexperience nearly cost him everything. He was supposed to stage a fake fight with professional wrestler Yuri Boryenko, but Lazenby's adrenaline took over and he threw a real punch, breaking the stunt coordinator's nose and sending him to the hospital. Most actors would have been blacklisted immediately. Instead, the producers were impressed by his genuine aggression. This wasn't some pretty boy pretending to be tough. Once filming began on Her Majesty's Secret Service, Lazenby's behavior became increasingly erratic. He treated the massive production budget like his personal playground, literally carrying his salary around in a suitcase. Fellow actor Telly Savalas and crew members invited the naive Australian to a poker game and systematically cleaned him out of nearly his entire paycheck. Producer Harry Saltzman had to personally join the poker game and win Lazenby's money back from his own crew. Lazenby's childhood brush with death had left him with a compulsive need to prove his invincibility through dangerous stunts. He suggested a scene where Bond would ski off a cliff and parachute to safety, so insane that producers couldn't afford to film it. When they refused his death-defying ideas, Lazenby started doing unauthorized stunts anyway. During his skiing sequence, he deliberately attempted forbidden jumps, resulting in a broken arm that set back the entire production schedule. The real drama was happening between Lazenby and Diana Rigg, who played the woman Bond marries. The relationship deteriorated so badly that it became a Hollywood legend. The most famous rumor claimed that Rigg deliberately ate massive amounts of garlic before their romantic scenes to make Lazenby uncomfortable. For decades, this story was repeated as fact, proving how much everyone on set hated the arrogant newcomer. But Diana Rigg herself eventually debunked the garlic myth, writing an angry open letter to the press in 1970, calling it complete fabrication. According to Rigg, the real problem was Lazenby's increasingly unstable behavior and his refusal to take direction from anyone. Why else would your dresser threaten to hand in his notice? Why else would 3 chauffeurs leave you within a week? These weren't vindictive complaints, they were desperate observations of someone watching a career implode in real time. What makes Lazenby's story tragic is that he seemed determined to destroy his Bond career before the film was even released. In late 1969, months before On His Majesty's Secret Service hit theaters, Lazenby made a decision that would haunt him forever. Against all advice, he held a press conference to announce that he would never play James Bond again.
His reasoning was based on one of the most spectacularly wrong predictions in entertainment history. Lazenby's advisors convinced him that the spy genre was about to become obsolete, killed off by the hippie movement. They pointed to Clint Eastwood making $500,000 per month doing westerns in Italy and suggested that Bond's sophistication would seem outdated within years.
Lazenby showed up to the press conference sporting a bushy beard and long hair, looking more like a Rockman member than a secret agent. "Bond is a brute," he declared. "I've already put him behind me. I will never play him again." It was a scorched earth approach that guaranteed he could never return to the role. The industry's reaction was swift and merciless. Producer Albert Broccoli felt personally betrayed, calling the casting "my biggest mistake in 16 years." Harry Saltzman allegedly promised to make sure Lazenby never worked again. The blacklisting was so complete that Lazenby eventually took out advertisements in Variety magazine, essentially begging for work. "If I could get a TV series or good movie, I swear I'd do it for nothing," he told reporters. Desperate and nearly broke, Lazenby fled to Hong Kong in 1973, hoping to rebuild his career in martial arts films. This led to one of entertainment history's eeriest coincidences. Lazenby had arranged to meet Bruce Lee about starring together in Game of Death, a project that could have revitalized both careers. They scheduled dinner for July 20th, 1973 to finalize details. That dinner never happened. On July 20th, Bruce Lee complained of a headache while visiting his mistress, took a painkiller, went to nap, and never woke up, dying at age 32 under circumstances that remained controversial. Lazenby was one of the last people to speak with Lee before his death, and some conspiracy theorists suggest the timing was more than coincidental. Lee's death destroyed Lazenby's last real chance at superstardom. Without Lee's star power, the Hong Kong film industry had little interest in an aging ex-Bond with a difficult reputation. Lazenby made a few low-budget martial arts films, but his career never recovered. The personal costs became even more heartbreaking. In 1973, he married wealthy heiress Christina Townsend, and they had 2 children, daughter Melanie and son Zachary. When Zachary was 11, he was diagnosed with a malignant brain tumor. Despite years of treatment, Zachary died in 1994 at age 19. The grief was so overwhelming that Lazenby and Christina divorced the following year. Lazenby married tennis champion Pam Shriver in 2002 and had 3 more children. But even this relationship was plagued with problems. Shriver filed for divorce in 2008, with reports suggesting that Lazenby's decades of frustration over his career decisions had made him difficult to live with. The cruel irony is that On Her Majesty's Secret Service has aged remarkably well. Modern critics often rank it among the best Bond films, praising its emotional depth and Lazenby's surprisingly effective performance. Even Sean Connery eventually gave his blessing, approaching Lazenby at a restaurant years later and simply saying, "You're good." But Lazenby's name has become synonymous with squandered opportunities. When George Clooney's Batman and Robin was criticized, reviewers called it the George Lazenby of Batman movies. His story serves as a cautionary tale about ego, bad advice, and the inability to recognize when you're living your dream. Today, George Lazenby is in his 80s, reportedly suffering from dementia and being cared for by his ex-wife, Pam Shriver. His brief moment as James Bond lasted just over a year, but walking away from that role shaped the rest of his life. In a parallel universe where Lazenby listened to better advice, he might have become one of the most beloved actors of his generation. Instead, his story remains Hollywood's most fascinating what-if. Proof that sometimes the biggest enemy of success isn't external competition, but the self-destructive impulses within us all. George Lazenby didn't just walk away from James Bond, he walked away from immortality itself, leaving behind only the haunting question of what might have been.